Microplastics can invade the brain in just 2 hours. Warning: reduce usage of these items at home. Did you know? In just 2 hours, microplastics can potentially invade your brain. Doctors warn that certain items in your home might allow microplastics to sneak in. Do you know what they are? If you want to avoid the health hazards of microplastics, follow the doctor's advice and see which items you should throw away immediately. 1. Why can microplastics invade the brain? Microplastics refer to plastic particles with a diameter of less than 5 mm. Due to their tiny size, microplastics can enter surrounding tissues through the small gaps in blood vessel walls. Once they enter the brain's vascular system, microplastics can potentially cross the blood-brain barrier. The blood-brain barrier is a natural physiological barrier around the brain's vascular system, protecting the brain from harmful substances. However, the small size of microplastics might allow them to cross the blood-brain barrier and enter brain tissue, posing a potential threat to human health. Besides the brain, where else in the human body are microplastics commonly detected? 1. Gastrointestinal tract. Food and drinks are one of the main pathways for microplastics to enter the gastrointestinal tract. The food and drinks people consume daily, especially packaged or processed foods, are likely to be influenced by plastic packaging materials. Microplastic particles can be released from packaging materials and come into contact with food. When people eat these foods, microplastics enter the gastrointestinal tract along with the food. Drinking water is also a significant source of microplastics in the gastrointestinal tract. Microplastic particles can be present in tap water and bottled water. When people drink these water sources, microplastics are ingested into the gastrointestinal tract. Especially through bottled water, as the water source might be affected by plastic bottles and caps, the microplastic content might be higher. Environmental plastic pollution is also a factor that cannot be ignored. Microplastic particles can be found in soil, air, and water sources, and can enter the human digestive system through the growth of vegetables and fruits, inhalation of air, or consumption of aquatic organisms like fish. 2. Lungs. The special structure of the respiratory system makes it easier for microplastics to enter the lungs. The human respiratory system includes the nasal cavity, trachea, and bronchi, which have a lot of small hair-like structures such as cilia and mucus layers to remove foreign substances from the respiratory tract. However, due to their extremely small size, microplastic particles might be small enough to evade these clearing mechanisms and be inhaled into the lungs. In urban environments, a large number of microplastic particles might be suspended in the air, carried into the respiratory system by wind, traffic, and other factors. Especially in industrial areas, the concentration of microplastic particles might be higher, increasing the possibility of absorption by the human respiratory system. In certain occupational environments, people might be exposed to microplastics for long periods, such as in plastic processing, production, waste treatment, and other fields. Workers in these environments are more likely to be affected by microplastics due to long-term exposure to high concentrations of microplastics. 2. 3 common household items containing microplastic. 1. Cigarette butts. Cigarette filters usually contain cellulose acetate or polypropylene fibers, which are types of plastic fibers. Filters are designed to capture some particles in smoke, but this also leads to the release of microplastic particles. These fibers might break down during smoking, forming tiny plastic particles that end up in the smoke. Tobacco leaves often contain some additives, including plastic resins. These plastic resins can release microplastic particles during the burning process. These microplastic particles in smoke eventually deposit in the cigarette butt. Cigarette butts usually consist of a paper shell and a plastic filter. These plastic parts might break down or wear out during the manufacturing process of cigarette butts, forming microplastic particles. When smokers discard cigarette butts, these microplastic particles enter the environment. 2. Polyester fiber clothes. Polyester fiber is a synthetic fiber made from polyester resin through spinning and other chemical treatments. This resin is usually extracted from fossil fuels like petroleum or natural gas. During the production of polyester fibers, the resin is processed into tiny particles and then spun under high temperature and pressure. During this process, tiny polyester fiber particles might be released from the manufacturing equipment into the environment. When people wash polyester fiber clothes, tiny fibers on the clothes surface might shed and enter the washing machine's drainage system. These tiny particles, known as fiber feathers, are a form of microplastic that might be discharged into water bodies with the wash water, eventually entering the environment. Over time and with frequent wear, polyester fiber clothes might wear out and age. This can cause tiny particles on the clothes surface to shed, becoming a source of microplastics. This is especially likely to happen in areas with high friction, such as the folds and areas that come into contact with the skin. 3. Tea bags. Generally, tea bags need a sealing material that can keep the tea leaves fresh. These plastic materials might release microplastic particles at higher temperatures. Some tea bags are made from nylon or plastic fibers to ensure the tea leaves stay intact and fresh during packaging and transportation. However, these materials might break down during use, releasing tiny plastic particles. 3. Can microplastics be removed from the human body? How to reduce intake? There is currently no direct way to remove microplastics from the human body. However, we can reduce microplastic intake by adjusting our lifestyle and food choices. 1. Use glass containers for cooking. Traditional heating methods in food cooking include stewing, boiling, and frying, often using plastic containers to hold and heat food. However, plastic containers might release tiny plastic particles when heated, increasing the risk of microplastics entering the food. Glass containers are a natural, harmless material for food storage and heating. Compared to plastic containers, glass does not contain microplastic particles and does not release harmful substances when heated. Therefore, using glass containers to steam and cook food helps ensure that food is not contaminated by microplastics during the cooking process. Using glass containers reduces the chances of food coming into contact with plastic. Plastic containers easily deform at high temperatures, releasing microplastic particles, while glass containers remain stable and do not pose similar problems. 2. Use fewer disposable plastic products. Due to their short lifespan and difficulty decomposing, disposable plastic products have become a major source of environmental pollution. When these plastic products are discarded or improperly disposed of, they might break down into tiny particles, namely microplastics. These microplastics can enter the natural environment through wind, water flow, etc., eventually entering oceans, lakes, and soil, negatively impacting ecosystems and human health. Once microplastics enter water bodies, they might be mistaken for food by aquatic organisms. These microplastic particles can transfer through the food chain, gradually accumulating in the upper levels of the food chain, ultimately affecting humans. 3. Use fewer exfoliating facial cleansers. Be cautious with facial cleansers containing exfoliating particles. Exfoliating particles in facial cleansers are usually made of plastic, mainly polyethylene and other plastic materials. These tiny particles are added to facial cleansers to exfoliate while cleaning the skin, making it smoother. However, due to their tiny size, traditional sewage treatment systems often find it difficult to effectively filter and remove them. As a result, microplastic particles might eventually enter natural water bodies, such as rivers, lakes, and oceans. Choosing natural facial cleansers without exfoliating particles can avoid this potential route of microplastic intake. In our daily lives, microplastics have become ubiquitous. Undoubtedly, this research sounds an alarm for us. Protecting the environment and health is a responsibility everyone should undertake. Only through collective effort can we effectively curb the harm caused by microplastics. Let's start now by changing our lifestyle, choosing eco-friendly and healthy products and habits.